Ultra.
Goes huge for Ultra, and they get their first home series victory.
Hi, hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Made in Esports. I'm your host Spencer, with me is Chris, and we got some pretty exciting news to talk about in the Call of Duty landscape today. As you guys can tell by the title of the video, it is the mid-season roster Mania. With that out of the way, guys, obviously before we get started, give us your thoughts on some of the transactions that you have seen go down so far in the CDL. Do you think it's going to work? Will we actually see who goes some places? Let us know in your comment section down below. And as always, if you guys enjoyed the content, leave us a like, thumbs up, give us your thoughts, all that fun stuff. Follow us on Twitter. Do all that jazz. We really appreciate it, and it helps the algorithm. And
follow me to my house.
Yeah, it helps feed my kids. So with that out of the way, guys.
Your kids?
Apparently. With that out of the way, guys, let's just jump right into this. As always, the first thing that I probably wanted to start off here was the actual official news. Obviously, the Hook stuff's more rumors and hearsay. The actual official news is, Looney has finally been benched from the Seattle Surge, and Decimate has been called in to replace him on that starting roster. Personally, obviously, our opinion at the beginning of the year going to the offseason. I was a big fan of building around young talent. When you watch that video on who the Ultra should pick up, the names we listed off were Asim, Hydra, Pred, Afro, Standy, Fire, and then obviously Venom as the year progressed. I'd still thought that was sort of the upper echelon of some of the potential AM talent. With that being said, Decimate has absolutely impressed me this year. I'm not going to lie. I didn't have him in that echelon, and I don't know if I still do, but he's a lot closer than I thought he was going to be. I think that Decimate has actually shown a lot of promise. Obviously, he's on AM. Yeah, obviously, he's not like in AM like someone like Standy, who's like unproven. Like Decimate's been in the pro scene before. Like I know that obviously he had a stint last year, and he's kind of came out in World War II, I believe. But he really impressed me, I think, throughout his stints and challenges. He obviously won a couple championships with Insight, or I say championships, but the challenges tournaments with Insight when he was on their team. He obviously won again with Sib. Recently playing with Methods, and that team has seen success. So good for him.
Fantastic for you do good, and obviously he actually won MVP of Elite Series in stage 2 as well. So he's definitely made his waves.
No, I agree. So it's a good pickup. Do I think it's the best pickup for the team? Obviously, if I could go back in time again when we had first made those comments, I think that they could have potentially put together maybe a bit of a better roster. I don't know if he comes in here and moves the needle enough for this to be like a championship caliber team. Maybe if Decimate had been in there from the beginning, they could have been more in that consistent top 8 conversation. But they actually got a lot of ground to make up. Not a lot to get around to get in that 8th position, but that 8th position is a bit of a bloodbath right now. But at the end of the day, I think he's going to improve the team. Obviously wish Looney nothing but the best. The whole thing.
Of course, if you guys weren't kind of following us back half a year ago, we made some comments about whether or not Looney should be picked up on another roster, and we disagree with it. And for having those thoughts and views, along with a couple other things around age and how it has to do with a person's skill and reaction time, we got ripped apart by the community pretty hard. And while we really never advocate for somebody to just do bad. I'm never sitting and just hoping that somebody plays poorly. We just have opinion on, how they have been performing and whether or not they deserve a spot in the future. While I am saying that, it feels good in a way to be right about something that we got so much flack for.
Yeah, and I mean, that's not that thing. You could go back and read the comments. I can open my DMs, and show you some of the messages that people were sending during the whole debacle. Again, it was never a personal vendetta or anything like that against Looney. I felt like there was a lot of question marks on that team, a lot of volatility, and I felt that, with these new generational talent, like I'd mentioned, Hydra, Pred, Afro, Standy, Venom, potentially coming up, and I think the way that the game was kind of changing, especially since, again, we knew that the year majority would be online. I thought there was some superstar talent out there that you could potentially try to grow out there and grab and build around, and then maybe have Looney as your 5th, who can kind of play that more S&D analyst role, which I think is what he's going to do now, right? Like, I don't know if he's going to play challengers. I think he said that he's open to coaching. I think Looney's obviously got a great brain. He's got a great knowledge of the game, so I think that he could still provide value in that. Will he go down to challengers and try to do both? Like, who knows? Like, we'll see.
It's hard to say, right? Because I mean, once again, we're bringing age to this, but at his age, like, what is the challengers scene going to be? Is it going to be like a 1-year arc where he like comes back in 2022 season or possibly 2023? When you're what is he, 28?
Yeah, I think he's turning 28 this year. But that's what I mean.
It's just a hard kind of arc to take. You don't have as much time to take that arc.
But even if he's not going to go to challenge, like, I don't think he's going to go to challengers and try to grind his way back up. And maybe he will. Honestly, maybe he will. But even if you just go to challengers and just get those reps in again, if you just go to challengers, constantly playing S&D, constantly practicing your hard point, and then you can take some of that knowledge as a fifth on organization and provide that to your team, and maybe be like, hey, here's what some of the other challengers teams are doing. Here's what my team's doing in scrims. Maybe that'll work for you guys. Maybe that's too much work on his plate. Like, I'm not sure. I don't think a lot of teams do that, but I think that could be an interesting sort of route to take. But I don't know, man. Like, again, I hope he figures it out, whatever the next steps are. Coaching, content creation. He's obviously got a ton of connections. And I think that this does improve the Seattle Surge. I think if I put them on paper right now in terms of your power rankings, I think they are the 8th best team, like, in relation to those other teams in their area. They have some sneaky potential now, I think, to make a run, especially the honeymoon period hits hard. They got some insane talent on that roster now. Can they put it together, I think, is a question mark. And I don't know if it's enough time. London's looking better. Obviously, Paris is looking better. There's some rumors that we're going to talk about next about who potentially going to Florida, which would make them look a lot better. So it's tough, but I'm glad Decime got the shot. Decime's actually impressed me a lot in challengers. That was one player who I didn't think was going to look as impressive as he did. So good for him for kind of proving me wrong.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting, and I'm hoping that maybe when he gets added, he'll definitely add some more speed towards some speed and damage towards the team and help them improve on that standpoint. And honestly, teamwork is probably going to be that one spot that takes him a little bit longer. Now for Lee, I genuinely don't know where he's going to go. I feel like he's probably going to stay in content creation. Like, I personally can't really see him as much as a coach, and I don't see him doing another. Yeah,
I could see him as a coach. I mean, again, everything I've heard about him is incredibly intelligent. So, like, if you just think you're right, like, it's hard to say, hey, just because someone's smart and, like, knows the game of COD doesn't mean they're immediately going to be, like, a god tier coach. Like, I don't think that's necessarily how it works. But I mean, if you just try to take two skills that could potentially, coincide with one another, like being able to read the game well and being intelligent in that aspect and being a coach, I think does make sense.
I mean, it's not necessarily the intelligence side too. I think it's a lot about how you deliver coaching that he may need to work on.
Maybe. I mean, we don't know that. Like, yeah, we don't know Looney. Like, I don't know him.
Speaking code right now.
Yeah, still as a coach, you never know. Like, we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, moving on though. I mean, this is the hottest news is Hook, and it has been Hook for a while. It's almost overshadowed this other a Looney thing just because Hook is such a great player. But I mean, the rumors in the rumor tree have been that he is possibly moving to Florida.
Yeah, and it's funny because there was rumors that he was moving to Florida, and I think they talked about it a bit on the flank, and I think that Cito Entel made a tweet about, like, the conversations are there, but it's not official. No bio's been set. I think the biggest thing holding that back potentially would be, could Florida match the buyout that would be required to bring somebody like Hook over? Because it's not going to be cheap, right? I think Methods came on the show and on the flank and said, like, minimum $500K, which is a lot of money. And then some people sort of theorize some other organizations, one being FaZe, which I think is incredibly unlikely, but another one being LA Thieves, which is a spicy destination for Hook to land on, especially if Hastro stays to his word and says, maybe they decide to move on from Hook and they are willing to trade him to a destination of his choice. Again, all this is predicated on Dallas moving on from Hook. I still think there's a very high possibility that they don't. But if they do, it's kind of a fun sort of game to be like, hey, where could Hook potentially end up?
And there's part of me that thinks that he may not move on still, right? Because
100%.
We can't deny the fact that he is a very talented player.
100%.
So why would he be dropped? Maybe it's because of team chemistry issues, or he's playing too individualistic. Not really. There may be something kind of on that secondary tier that's not working out, and I feel like that's something that's easier fixed than pure skill.
I mean,
if he's sitting here and like. Maybe the bench was a wake up he needed. to be like, oh shit, I gotta change these parts.
Yeah, kind of, but the thing is, like, so when I definitely agree, but if it was like an easier fix, I feel like they would have already fixed it. Like, I think the fact that they brought him on the bench, I mean, yeah, in theory, like if you relate it to the traditional sports mentality, right, it's like you bench the young like superstar to teach him a lesson and bring him back in. He feels revitalized, but I don't know if that translates as well to Call of Duty. Maybe it will. I don't know if that translates as well to Call of Duty though. Like,
I don't know his personality. Okay, so I'm just kind of blowing to the wind right now, but you have some guy who's widely regarded as one of the better players in the league. Maybe he's got a little bit of an ego. Maybe when they're trying to work him while he's playing as a starter, he's pretty reluctant because he's like, screw this, I'm doing well, like I'm making the team good. They bench him just to freaking check his ego.
Yeah, maybe that's if it's obviously there's a lot of like potentials here that we're sort of like assumptions that we're making because as far as I know, Hook isn't one of those players who has a ton of ego. But maybe you're right. Like obviously, I could see a world in which if that were the case, where like a major on the sidelines could potentially reinvigorate him. I think that Dallas would still be a better team with him in the lineup as opposed to Fellow. That's not a knock on Fellow. I think Fellows a good player. I just like the roles a little bit better with Hook in there. I think that it's not a hot take to say that I think Hook's better than Fellow. Different roles, so not really fair, but still, I think Hook's a special talent. But with that being said, it's a little bit more fun to assume that he does get moved on because then you get to sort of theorize, where could Hook potentially end up.
And it makes more sense because for me at the moment, I feel like Dallas with Hook was a little bit better than Dallas with Fellow, and that's no like point to Fellow. It could still be like a teamwork issue because they really just brought him on, whereas Hook's been on there for a while.
I think it's still
so they could get better, but if they remain the same, then Dallas is probably still looking to maybe have Fellow as that temporary fix and get somebody else in while they figure out what to do with Hook.
Yeah, but that's kind of brings me to the next point. Is like let's sort of start to theorize who could that next person be and where could they potentially move Hook, because the first of which is just a pure buyout, which I think is possible, but like a little bit less likely because if you're Dallas and you just get money, like I feel like the money that the budget's already been allocated. Like, I don't know if money alone would be enough. Like, maybe Hasho truly is, with this boy to the end. And, like, yeah, they just give him money. They'll just move on. But I think there's some, like, legitimate trade scenarios where you could potentially see a player being moved. So Florida's very interesting to bring up. Obviously, I think if there's a world in which Florida is willing to spend the money and can get Hook for just money, that team becomes really scary. The core of Skies, Awakening, and Hook, I think, is a championship caliber core. At that point, Neptune is your fourth, probably, or Havoc. And I don't know if that would be the most ideal fit, but I think both those players are talented, and alongside a core like Hook, Skies, and Awakening could easily be a championship team. Like, that would be as good as I think the Seattle's is also going to improve with Decimate in there. If you get Hook into that Florida lineup, I seriously think they can, start also pushing for that championship slots and potentially get that top 8 position. That top 8 position will be a bloodbath. But I think it's a little bit more interesting to talk about the potential trade of let's say Skies for Hook, because I don't know why Dallas does that, but Awakening for Hook is actually an interesting trade that I think has a little bit more merit than some people give it credit for. I know they brought it up on the flank, and everybody immediately dismissed it because why would Florida do that? And on paper, I agree. Like in a bubble of like, let's just look at this year. I agree because I think that Awakening is insanely talented. I am such a big Awakening fan. I think he does so much in terms of respawn, S&D. He does it all, right? And that's not to say that I think Awakening is better than Hook or Hook's better than Awakening. I think they're both S tier players at their position, and usually in Florida's position, it's like just why make the trade, right? Like why make the trade? Especially you got to bring in like a bigger contract your way. You're spending more money for another S tier player. Like I'm a big fan of both those players. I think the question more comes when you start talking about what is the likelihood that Awakening re-signs with Florida, and did Hook like potentially sign another extension? Whereas if you did make a trade for Awakening to Hook, if you're Florida, will you have Hook guaranteed onto your roster for the year after, or the year after that, for instance? Because I think there's a legitimate possibility where I'm pretty sure it's public knowledge that Awakening's on the last year of his deal. I think that's the case. And if Awakening's on the last year of his deal, I think there's a very real possibility that after this year ends, he just doesn't re-sign with Florida. And that's not like a knock on Florida as an organization. Like they're not like a fucking trash organization. You don't even by any stretch of the imagination. They've actually seen a lot of success. I think they had three chips from last year, right? Like they're an organization that has won in the past in this like CDL era. But if you're Awakening, you're like probably going to be one of, if not the biggest free agent on the market next year. I don't know everybody's contract situation in front of me, but just off the top of my head, every single team I feel like is going to be calling his name. Like if you're Dallas, for instance.
Yeah, and if I see, and then just interject, like if I see Awakening sitting here, there's part of me that thinks that he kind of wants to just kind of start fresh, you know, not even just with the fact that they haven't been performing this year, but also just with the unfortunate events that happened before. He just wants to get a fresh start, maybe.
Maybe, but even just if you just look at it just this year in terms of their competitive performances, yeah, if you're Awakening, like, you know, why not maybe go to 100 Thieves? You know, 100 Thieves, they got Kenny, Draza, Venom, you know, does Draza go to that sub position? TJ, right? Like, they could also, you're 100 Thieves, they could potentially bring in another superstar player to play alongside him. Like, who's more likely to bring in superstar talent, 100 Thieves or Florida? I think it's 100 Thieves. So, if you're Dallas, right, and you have Crimsix, Shotzi, and Illy, and you have Fellow in the AR position right now, again, I like Fellow, but I would prefer Awakening. You know what I mean? Awakening goes into that position, all of a sudden, they're looking a lot better. So, that's in the free agent market. So I think if you're Florida, you're sitting there going, hey, wait a minute. There's a very realistic possibility that we have Awakening for this year only. We might not even make playoffs, especially if you don't make a true deal, or a hook deal, sorry, because Seattle might be a better team than you with their new roster. And if we don't make playoffs, the chances of us keeping Awakening are actually very low. So if you're Dallas, is there not a world in which you just, or sorry, if you're Florida, is there not a world in which you just say, hey, like, let's just trade Hook for Awakening, assuming Hook also has more term left on his deal, and that way next year you have Skies and Hook, and you try to build around that core. I know a lot of people shut down the Awakening for Hook deal, but I actually think it's relatively plausible. Only if Florida thinks that there's a real possibility they won't sign Awakening. Now, that's information I'm not privist. Like, I don't know. Maybe they have had like ongoing negotiations with him, and they're like pretty confident they can get him back for, you know, the next 3-4 years.
Honestly, with the information we know in terms of like the thoughts they're going to Florida, that really to me is one of the only things that makes sense. Like I don't think that Dallas is going to part ways with him and kind of do him a solid and buy him out. I don't think that Florida is just going to straight buy Hook off of them. It's because he's just so much money. And I don't think that Dallas cares about trading Hook for sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. For Neptune or
no, yeah, you wouldn't trade Neptune or Havoc for
like
Hook.
because it just doesn't make sense. Like skill gap, like
unless it was like Neptune Havoc and like $500,000. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It just doesn't make sense. Like they're just not valuable enough to. So with that knowledge we have, the only thing that makes sense to me is that trade for Wade.
Yeah, and then what I'm saying is if you are Florida, and let's say you're willing to do a buyout, but you just can't pay $500K, maybe you trade Awakening for Hook, and then you get Hook, Skies, Neptune, and then maybe you go to FaZe and you buy out Sib, right? Like maybe you get Sib, Skies, Hook, Neptune, or Havoc, or whoever, right? Like that's a pretty good team. Like that's
next thing you know, you're
and if you buy out Sib, like could you buy out Sib and potentially re-sign him to another multi-term deal? Like again, Sib, Skies, Hook is an incredibly exciting core. Now I don't know if the personality is going to work. I don't know fundamentally. There might be some question marks there for sure, but on paper, talent-wise, gun skill-wise, that is an elite roster. Like there's more to building a team than just getting talent. I get that, but at the very least, I think you're in a better position than you are currently.
Yeah, I agree. I think the last thing to touch on here is LAG's. Bit of a drop for Chino.
I actually think that there's another scenario. Sorry, before we move on.
I think we kind of blast this one to death, Spencer.
No, but what we haven't talked about is the potential that LA Thieves trades for Hook. Because we basically spend all the time on Florida. Okay. But I do think there's a world in which LA Thieves could potentially trade, like Venom, for instance, for Hook. And that wouldn't work 1-for-1. But again, I think you could do Venom in a pretty decent amount of cash and get Hook. Because LA Thieves is in a position where they want to win. LA Thieves is in a position where they probably have capital. And I know the roster's clicking right now. Maybe you don't want to wreck a good thing. Like, this isn't a, hey, trade Venom because he sucks. I think Venom's an incredible talent. But I think that could arguably benefit Dallas, where they now get that change. Because you'd be able to move Illy back onto the flex role. And then you'd have Shotzi, Venom, Illy, Crimsix. I still think Hook's better, but I'm saying they've already benched him. I mean, improve Dallas with Fellow in the lineup. Maybe just Venom's a bit of a better team player or team fit, whatever it is, whatever the reasons were. Maybe he fits that like those roles better. And then if you're LA Thieves, you got to probably put some cash behind that. But all of a sudden now you got Hook, TJ, Draza, Kenny. which in my opinion, I think Venom's an incredible talent. I think Hook's better, so I think that would maybe make them a little bit more of a championship contending team. So I think that's another like low key interesting trade that's an option. But yeah, sorry, that was my last little tangent because I think it would be cool.
Okay, well, let's see how it pans out. I'm gonna weigh the Florida Mutineers scenario higher than the LAG one or LAT one.
I agree.
But yeah, LAG, Vivid for Chino. Now I know last time we chatted, we're like, and you're kind of more strong in this position. We're like, wow, this is like a pretty, this seems like a little bit of a downgrade. But I feel like
That was a massive downgrade.
yeah, massive downgrade. But we saw them play not too badly over the weekend. Like I know they got 3-0'd by Toronto, but let's not pretend like the first 2 wins by Toronto were like easy wins, right?
Yeah, we'll be quick on this one because I do think we spent too much time on the Hook debacle and the stuff before that.
Yeah.
It's getting late here, guys. Sorry. I will say that I thought this was going to be a terrible decision. I still think it was the wrong decision, but I thought that LAG was legitimately going to be an easy 3-0 from here on out with that current roster. And maybe it's just a honeymoon period. And I do think that they will come back down to earth a little bit. Like I still don't think that this team all of a sudden will be the team to push into that top 8 position over Florida, over Seattle. I just want to give a shout out that they have impressed me with how they've looked. I thought there was going to be a bit of a bonfire. It was not. Their teamwork has seemed solid, and Chino's actually came in there and looked really good. So good for him. He's gotten his moment, and I think he's made the most out of it. So the team's impressed me. I don't know if it's going to maintain. I still think they'll probably finish in that 11th or 12th position. But regardless, it is not the easy 3-0 that I thought it was going to be, so I just want to give them a bit of a shout-out.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Yeah, we'll definitely see how they progress, and like just with time, their teamwork's going to get better. So guys, hey, if you like our conversation today, please like and subscribe. It really helps put food on our table.
Yep.
Every like is every piece of crumb of bread
the kids are hungry, so
for my children to eat. And if you disagree with us, let us know in the comments. We're happy to chat about it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. As always, guys, thank you for watching and enjoy.